Welcome to this edition of Daytona Beach Radio, presented by the City of Daytona Beach, Florida, with your radio host, the Reverend Dr. L. Ronald Durham. This weekly program features key persons from city government, business, and the community who will share their knowledge about what's happening in Daytona Beach. That will always be interesting and informative. Now join me as Dr. Durham welcomes the featured speaker for today's program. Good afternoon, beloved, and welcome to this edition of Daytona Beach Radio. I am your host, Dr. L. Ronald Durham. This program is sponsored by the City of Daytona Beach, Florida, and we're delighted on December the 11th to be on the air live with you with our regular broadcast. To those of you who are watching us by Facebook, we're happy that you're tuned in to see what I look like and the guest that I have with me in the studio today. And today is a special day. I want to begin with the announcement that I'm out of breath because I've been running all morning over at First Step Shelter. Today was the ribbon cutting. And myself, our studio engineer, my wonderful assistant, Carla, and I have been over at the shelter since this morning. Had a great ribbon cutting. Carla, I think there were 300 people there, you think, at least? Just a tremendous turnout from the community, from business owners to clergy. Several clergy were there. Of course, many of the agencies like Halifax Health, Hospital, Advent Health, Florida Blue Foundation, and boy, the list just goes on and on. Stuart Marchman Act was also there, and Catholic Charities, who will be running the day-to-day operations of the shelter. Of course, Mayor Henry gave a great speech about the importance of First Step Shelter, what it will mean to the community, how it will help those individuals who come through that facility. The chair of our county council, Mr. Ed Kelly, was there. He gave splendid remarks as well. And we do want to thank Father Phil Ejito, the pastor of Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic Church over on the beach side. Just a wonderful invocation to get everything started. But wonderful program. Everything went, I think, very, very well. So if you missed it, you can go to the city's Facebook page. If you're on that page right now, you know where it is. There was a live stream that was done by the communications department for the city. So you should be able to go there, access the video, and I would just sit down, watch it from beginning to end. It's not a long program at all, but I think you will really enjoy the sights and sounds of First Step Shelter. We are also going to be putting 2 additional videos on Facebook within the next day or two. We should have those formatted and ready to put on the Facebook page. Interviews that I did with Mr. Gary Tester, the Executive Director of Catholic Charities. We also did an interview with Mr. Mike Panaggio, member of the Board of Directors for First Step Incorporated, and also our mayor, Derek Henry. So those are coming in the next couple of days. As soon as we can get it formatted and ready, those will be put up for you to watch as well. December the 16th, that is another milestone date. That's just a few days from now. The first homeless individual, I don't know who it will be, but the first homeless individual, when they open the doors on the 16th, will walk through that door. Hopefully we can get some of the every television station in Volusia County was at the ribbon cutting today. I certainly invited them to come back on the 16th so that they could witness who that first or who the first few individuals would be that come through the door. I think that'll be a monumental day, a monumental occasion, and it should be documented on camera. And I think we need to track that first person that comes through, and hopefully that will be the first person that comes out with a new job with a place to live, with hope, with their lives hopefully restored. So a lot of things, good things happened today, and this is the first day of a lot of things we will see happen at the shelter. But my guest today, our monthly series on a green Daytona, and my guest is our local environmental expert, Miss Jenny Nazak, who is always a delight to have on the program, and she educates us about how we can keep things green in our community and protect the resources and discover new. And that's what I found out, Jenny. You not only protect the resources we have, but you always seem to be bringing things that help us discover new resources and new ways that that we can protect our environment. So sit back. If you'd like to give us a call, talk to my guest in person, you can call us on the phone. 386-516-8030 is our live number. 386-516-8030. If you're on Facebook and you have a question or a comment you'd like to make, please put your post right on the Facebook page. Carla will check that periodically, and if you have one on there, we'll get your question on the air. So welcome, Miss Jenny.
Thank you so much, Ron, and I really want to say congratulations to you and all the city and all the partners who have gone into the hard work for the opening of the First Step Shelter. It's a big piece.
It is, and it's been a labor of love. And I said, it's funny, I said at the ribbon cutting this morning, if there was a book that would guide us on how to open and run a shelter, I probably would have read it 100 times by now. But there is no such thing. And,
well, you started writing some of it. One thing I always say to people in my field, which is permaculture design, the design of the human environment to meet human needs while also restoring ecosystems. What we say is permaculture, you cannot just have an ecologically sustainable thing. The social element has to be in there and the economic element. Yes. And so if you have something that's socially unsustainable, it will eventually degrade the environment, as well as environmental degradation creates many of our social problems.
Absolutely.
And a big piece is how we care for our most vulnerable citizens.
That is so true.
Yeah.
And thank you for that statement. That really ties well into what we've started and what we've been doing when it comes to that population. But you gave us a great topic for today, and you hit me with a big word that I haven't heard in a little while. Today we're going to be talking about resilience. And so when you use that word resilience as it relates to a green environment, what does resilience mean?
Well, I'm going to give you a definition that's being used in the regional government authorities and other governmental bodies that are involved in the effort to boost our local resilience.
Okay.
So that would be resilience, the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, and systems within a region to plan, sustain, adapt, recover, improve, and grow collaboratively. Regardless what kind of chronic stresses and acute shocks they experience.
Wow.
Through specific actions and implementation strategies geared to address specific vulnerabilities.
Okay.
Now that's a big nightmare. Nightmare. That's a big mouthful. It might be a nightmare for some. And this was adapted from the 100 Resilient Cities definition. Now, what that is, in a nutshell, it's being resistant to risk factors and able to withstand hardship and bounce back. And this is on the individual level, the household level, the neighborhood level, the community level, and beyond. Having the skills and knowledge to get our needs met and thrive regardless of circumstances. Being equipped to weather what comes. Having systems and practices in place that reduce the likelihood of being hit as strongly by the disasters, and then if we are hit, to reduce the impact of the disaster as if it comes. So we're going to be unpacking this. Don't worry, I'm not going to, okay, bye, that was the show.
Right. Yeah, I need help.
Yeah,
But really, I really get it. And that definition, although lengthy,
Yeah.
you said one word in your analysis of it, and that was bounce back.
Bounce
And
back.
I think that runs parallel to the word resiliency. You have to be able to have that ability to bounce back.
Right.
And not feel, not give up hope.
Not give up hope.
Not feel defeated, not feel as though there's nothing that can be done.
That's right.
So this word resiliency, I love it. So why have you chosen that word resilience as your topic for this month's Green Daytona?
Well, I keep running into it. It is so big in the news right now. The Daytona News Journal has been stepping up its coverage of environmental issues such as sea level rise and other manifestations of climate instability. And resilience is a big thing. They covered the Florida recently got its first chief resilience officer, Dr. Julia Neshawat, and her appointment was covered in the news, and the Daytona Area Chamber of Commerce hosted her at a speaker series. So there's just been, it's very much in the news and very much up in our faces right now.
And so I'm glad you see and find all of these nuances to helping us understand how we keep our environment green, and because without your input each month as you come on this program, many times we just see things. You know how you can see things but you don't see it.
Oh yeah.
And so the word resilience, it's something that most of us have heard, but attaching it and combining it with a green environment, to me is really exciting. And so I'm excited to hear some of the things you're going to tell us about this resilience to our environment. You are listening to Daytona Beach Radio here on Joy 106.3 FM. This is Daytona's favorite gospel station. My guest is our local environmental expert, Miss Jenny Nazak, and she's here today and every month. We bring her on the second Wednesday of the month to just kind of bring more information to us, because there's so much out there when it comes to protecting and understanding the environment we live in. And so I hope you're sitting back, relaxing, enjoying the program. If you'd like to call us with your own question or your own comment, please do so at 386-516-8030. That's 386-516-8030. So, Jenny, what is the nature of the threats that our communities are facing right now?
Well, the ones that I'm referring to and that they're referring to in that definition are, for example, sea level rise,
Okay.
Precipitation changes with the drought flood extremes, increasingly severe storms,
Which we see.
which we see,
Yeah.
somewhat in this area, but more in other areas of the United States and elsewhere, wildfires, toxicity events, red tides, blue-green algae, and so on. And then a lot of what this all comes down to is unstable conditions of various kinds that are precipitated by sort of some human activity that we can start to help reform. And then with all of that, the associated social and economic upheaval. Those are the basic threats that government has got its eye on and is trying to address, and that the media are trying to alert us to.
And that's so helpful, because I think when we're educated and we know what these threats are, I think that the light bulb kind of goes off when we see things like, for instance, yesterday we hit what was probably a record for this time of year when it comes to our weather pattern.
Really? Yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday.
Yesterday.
So
Was it that hot?
yeah, it was like 85, which
Oh, my
is
goodness.
way up there.
That was way hotter than, yeah.
Yeah. So, we see these things and they're subtle,
Yeah.
they don't kind of smack us in the face.
Right.
But with what you're telling us today, these threats are things that can help us say, oh, okay.
Okay.
And recognize that we have to be watching our environment and watching the things that are going on around us.
Right. And these threats, they have consequences that most of us by now have either experienced personally, or our family members or friends have experienced them personally. And these can include disruption of the water and food supply, power outages, destructions of property, damage to infrastructure, disruption of economic growth and development over the long term, immediate losses of businesses and livelihoods. Potentially in the future, some places could become uninhabitable. According to the News Journal editorial earlier this month, in 20 years, Florida will face a 76 billion with a B cost just to protect existing structures against encroaching coastal waters.
Wow.
And then hurricane economic costs, for example. Hurricane Harvey was a $121 billion storm. Matthew, $6 billion. Irma, $50 billion.
Wow.
I mean, my gosh. And so the good news is there are things we can do to help mitigate against the extremes of that.
Yeah. And you know, they've been lately, you hear this term, superstorm.
Superstorm.
And I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, you're the expert, but I think those superstorms are only supposed to come like once in a generation.
That's why they're called
that.
superstorms.
Right.
So they're going to have to be called something else. I guess.
Yeah.
You're going to have to ratchet up.
A different
Yeah.
name, because now we're seeing the frequency of the storms on a regular
100-year
basis.
floods,
Yeah,
500-year
yeah.
floods.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So things are changing. Our environment is changing at sea levels, and Florida being sort of a peninsula, if you will, we're surrounded by water on three sides. I mean, that's something that we have to really watch. I would think pretty closely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you've often said that your mission, and I like this as an eco-educator, is to popularize low footprint living. So what is the connection between low footprint living and resilience?
All right, so I'll take a simple example. A lot of us humans, we're just taking up a lot of space that we don't need to be. For example, some of our landscaping practices are using a lot of water because of how we're doing it. We don't set up the soil to absorb water, and so we end up using way more water than we need. And so if there is a disruption to our water supply, we're vulnerable because we need so much.
Right.
But if we rein in our needs and become more right-sized and sensible in relation to the land and to other species and to all people, we won't be using as much, we won't need as much. Even things like food, supposedly 40% of the food in the United States ends up getting thrown away, and there's people going hungry.
Yes.
So as we get more sensible about managing our food supply and making sure that it's distributed to rightly, and it won't go to waste.
Absolutely.
And things like when food scraps, just even composting our food scraps instead of sending them to landfill. We're being more resilient. We're turning what used to be thought of as a waste product into a resource. We're keeping it out of landfill. Landfill creates greenhouse gases that go into the atmosphere and precipitate some of these disastrous conditions we're talking about. So every little thing's connected.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And you can look at these cheeks and know that I don't leave too much food behind on the table. But despite my cheekbones, I put a lot of food goes down the hatch here. So yeah. And I can remember growing up as a kid, and my grandmother who raised me always saying, make sure you eat everything on your plate, because there are kids in China that are starving.
Kids in China that are starving. Now the good news is there's microbes in the soil that will be very happy to help us eat the food.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. Oh, and then another vulnerability is how we use electricity. We've become very dependent on a large amount of electricity that we really don't need if we really get smart about how much we're consuming.
Very true.
Yeah.
You're listening to Daytona Beach Radio. My guest is our local environmental expert, Ms. Jenny Nazak. We're talking about a word that I haven't heard in a long time, but the word is resilience. And Jenny is connecting us to how resilience applies and affects and impacts our environment and where we live on a daily basis. We'd love for you to call in with your own question or your own comment if you have one. Maybe there's something you've noticed about either the weather patterns or the rise in water or the lack of water, maybe drought conditions that you've noticed. But if there's something that you've seen that you have a question about, or you'd like Jenny to expound on a little bit, she's right here today to take that question. The phone number is 386 386-516-8030. That's 386-516-8030. So Jenny, what if anything is the federal government doing? Because I think we kind of always look to the federal government for a lot of the help that we need. What is the government doing to promote this term resilience?
Well, actually, yeah, the federal government's doing a good bit. There are several federal agencies offering grants to communities and for doing things that boost resilience. For example, FEMA has recognized the importance of proactive steps rather than just responding after a disaster. So FEMA and also U.S. Department of Agriculture and the EPA, they're awarding grants for things like living shorelines, which are being shown to be more effective than just a conventional seawall in mitigating floods and stormwaters.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, there's a lot of grants.
Yeah, because if the government kind of leads the way, if you will, you have that trickle down effect where they start helping our counties, they start helping our local cities with these grants and other opportunities that can mitigate some of these things that we're seeing starting to encroach on nature itself.
Well, exactly. And I also learned last week in my research for this show that the federal government is awarding grants for education. Education for both children and adults in communities likely to be affected by climate threats. So, for example, some students in Colorado recently played a game. This was funded by an educational grant. They played a game that actually enhanced their personal knowledge of how to deal with wildfires. So kids were learning how to deal with wildfires. Wildflowers good too. But and then on the eastern shore of Maryland, there was a boat excursion that taught kids through hands-on experience all about wildlife and its connection to our practices and sea level rise and all that. So there are these grants for education.
Wow.
So, I mean, in my circles, in grassroots kind of environmental circles, in the past, we have been inclined to, on the one hand, disparage the government for not doing enough, and then, on the other hand, not trust the government.
Right.
But it's both. The government is doing what it can do. It's doing some good stuff.
Yeah.
Now, there are people who are very worried because President Trump has considerably reduced the powers of the Environmental Protection Agency. But there's numerous other agencies awarding these grants. They're not just coming from one.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. And I want to point out also, government is big.
Yes.
This hand can be doing something completely different from the other hand. So, for example, we have the U.S. Secretary of Transportation urging us to build more airports. How great that's going to be for economic development. Now, obviously, some of us who are worried about climate change are not all that keen on building more airports. We're more about, trains, public transport, walking, bicycling, but that is a thing that's being promoted. But on the other hand, this other arm of the federal government is really trying to promote resiliency.
Yeah.
So,
and it's funny you mentioned transportation. I don't remember the program I was watching last week, but there is a new I don't know if it's new, but there is a push coming for these flying cars and taxis in particular. Now, I don't know if I'd want to be in a flying taxi, say, in the middle of New York City, but Carla's shaking her head.
Well, as much as I used to love the Jetsons when I was growing up.
But there's a big push on now they're already in development. Within the next year or two, we may be seeing flying automobiles. Now, how crazy is that?
That is really crazy.
Yeah. But technology is progressing. We do see these kind of developments and things coming, and so I think it's an exciting time.
It is.
I almost wish I was 15 again, because you could kind of see some of these things for a longer period of time. But technology doesn't stop.
Technology doesn't stop.
No.
And we can use it and harness however we want.
Yeah.
But a lot of what we do with our attitudes and our social connections has the power.
That's very true. 386-516-8030 is our live call-in number. maybe you have a question. Jenny just mentioned the Jetsons. Maybe you watched the Jetsons as a kid. I did.
I did. And back then I thought a flying car would just be the bee's knees, but I don't think so anymore.
Right.
But,
Give us a call if you have a question or a comment you'd like to make on our Green Daytona program for this month of December. The number again is 386-516-8030. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, we do want to give you a Disney wave. And if you have a question or a comment you'd like to make it right on the Facebook page. Carla just checked it a minute ago, and we'll get your question on the air. So you just talked about the federal government, Jenny, and things that they're doing. What is the state of Florida doing when it comes to this word resilience?
well, as well as similar to the federal government, there are state agencies offering grants for resilience-related things. And then also we recently appointed our first state Chief Resilience Officer, CRO, and that is who I mentioned earlier, Dr. Julia Neshawat. Dr. Neshawat, has military experience. She's been in the State Department, and she did her thesis, her doctoral thesis in Japan.
Wow.
about coastal resilience in the wake of the Fukushima disaster. So the state's really not messing around. They really appointed somebody who has organizational and administrative skills.
That is great.
And she has a wide mission. She's promoting awareness among the various communities all around the state. She's a liaison with Tallahassee and Washington, and she's just very busy.
I bet.
And going
I bet.
about, yeah.
That's great. And it was good to hear you say that they are giving grants for, education and educating people about resilience. So I'm going to put a bee in your bonnet. Go to the Facebook page and take one of these videos that we do every month and send it off and write your own grant, and maybe you never know.
Hey, you never know.
You never
never know. And in the meantime, I go around the community doing a lot of things pro bono. So that's an option.
I
We
think
got
we
a
have
caller.
a
Woohoo.
caller. Welcome to Daytona Beach Radio.
Excuse me?
You're on. Turn your radio down, please. We got a little
Yeah.
squeal.
Hello?
We got the background. Hi, how are you? Welcome to Daytona Beach Radio.
Okay. Hey, listen, the reason for my call is I think, isn't President Trump wanting to take monies out of global warming and the stuff that you guys are talking about today, so far as
Yes, sir.
what you talking about today?
Yes, sir. That is in fact the case.
Yeah.
And I was going to mention also, most of you are probably aware that the United States withdrew from the Paris Agreement,
Climate
the
Accords,
international
yes.
accord.
Yes.
That is true. However, there are other arms of our very own federal government that are still working on this. And then even though President Trump backed out of the climate conference that was going on over in Madrid, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi took a delegation over there, and there's also this movement called WeAreStillIn.com. So for every current that's going in a bad direction, there are multiple other currents moving in a positive direction.
All
Well,
right.
that's good. Do you see President Trump, what he's doing? Is he influencing any other countries to do the same?
I don't see that he's influencing other countries to do the same. I haven't done much research on that, but I don't see him as influencing other countries. I mean, there may be a bandwagon that like agrees with what he does, but I don't know how much he's actually influenced others.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
don't.
good
I don't
thing for
think.
me to check out.
think anybody else has pulled out of the climate accord, other than the United States at this point.
Right,
So,
right.
But that was a great question.
Very
sir.
good
Yeah, we
question. Thank
appreciate
you
that
very much. Yeah.
All right. Have a good day, and thanks for
Thank
answering
you.
my question.
Thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much.
Keep listening. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
All right. Bye now. That was a great question.
Yeah, it was
but-
very important. Yeah.
very important. And you're right. I don't think anybody else has pulled out, other than the U.S. from the Paris Climate Accord agreement. And maybe, hopefully, we will get back into that group of countries that do see the importance of maintaining our environment
That's right.
and
That's right.
not being wasteful in certain areas. And
Well, and I also want to bring up a a thing that people often bring up. Well, what about China? China makes a lot of emissions, global warming emissions. Well, for one thing, they have 2 billion citizens. We have, what, less than 400 million. And let's see, what we're emitting like 20 tons, and they're emitting 18 or however million tons or whatever. It's like 20 versus 18, but they've got 2 billion people. And then also, if you look at a lot of China's activity, it often leads straight back to the mirror, we the consumer. So that's a factor as well.
Absolutely. Always has been. Everything's consumer driven, and China's about making as much as they can. They have one of the world's strongest economies along with ours. And so, we have to recognize how we're all intertwined. I mean, it's nice to be, have that America First attitude, but we all have to realize that we have to work together.
Right.
It's very important, I think, to work together. You're listening to Daytona Beach Radio. We'd love your call. We'd love your comment. We'd love your question. 386-516-8030. That's 386-516-8030. So we've talked about federal government. We've talked about the state government. So I guess let's get right down to us. What about the local government? What do you see that they are doing when it comes to resilience?
Well, let's see. So we have a regional level and we have a county level, and both of those are actively participating in the planning. I'm going to have to read the long name of this organization. What is it? The EC, that resilience. It's the East Central Florida Resiliency Plan. Resiliency. I forget what the C stands for. Sorry, but. There is a Resilient Volusia County report, and there's also a regional East Volusia report. They're resilience action plans.
Wow.
And they are both 139 pages long.
Oof.
And I have skimmed them. There's more obviously to delve into, but they've got several pages of computer modeling, threat assessment, lists of population centers where there's vulnerabilities. They have the lists of all the grants that are available. I mean, there's these big reports, but there's evidence of coordination going on. Yeah.
But 100, when you think about when you first said the number 139 pages, my first inclination was, wow, how big is that? But I guess when you look at the overall picture of the environment in general, it's huge.
It's huge.
So 139 pages, I don't think is really that.
It's relatively streamlined if you consider that. I think our own city's land development code is like 800 pages or something. Oh, here we go. All right. So the East Central Florida Regional Resilience Action Plan.
Okay.
Prepared by the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council.
Okay.
So those are the point organizations regionally.
So people can go Google that name, I guess, and kind of get
They
more
can find a
information.
PDF and delve into it and learn and engage. Yes.
All right. So
yes.
if people have a couple of hours to sit,
Yeah.
139 pages. But you know what? You never know what you'll see, and you never know how it will impact a person's understanding
Right.
and awareness. So
Right.
like you skimmed it, there may be others who'd want to do likewise.
Might be others, and everybody's got different skills that they bring to skimming such a report and working with other people. I also want to mention locally the role of journalism. Our own news journal has really stepped up its environmental coverage, and it's in everything from garden coverage to sea level rise coverage. I mean, I'm really seeing more of it. And they have recently joined this statewide opinion project called the Invading Sea, and there's going to be more editorials and things promoting resilience and raising awareness about all this.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
But that's good to know, because when you see all of this activity and this buzz, around resilience and around our environment, that it means that we're paying attention. And
That's right.
And that's what I think it takes. It takes paying attention, seeing what's going on, and then beginning the process of mitigating those areas that we can.
That's right. Yeah. And there's also something else I just learned about yesterday that I don't remember the name of, but it's something that cities are signing on to, and basically cities and local governments are signing on to. Volusia County has signed on to it. Something like 78 local governments have signed on to this agreement to just get on the same page and work in tandem about the climate.
All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that, because partnerships, I think, make a major difference.
Major.
Because sharing bits and pieces of information that one organization may acquire that another organization doesn't know about can speed up, I think, the process of us, developing a plan and having an action plan that really kind of helps us protect what we have.
Absolutely.
So, we touched on it a little while ago, but let's get back to it, and that's sea level rise and extreme weather. I mentioned yesterday was close to a record when it comes to heat. So sea level rise and extreme weather are large scale issues. So can individuals possibly, as an individual, do anything to boost our local resilience?
Absolutely. And it's very complex. It's not like I can reduce my electricity consumption and then the global warming effect reduces the sea level in our area so much. It's more the power of what we do as individuals and then share with others as a multiplier effect. So the society that we're in today, the resource patterns that we have today, grew out of societal change. It wasn't that one person or one government decided to mandate, hey, we're suddenly going to start using a bunch of plastic, or
Right.
we're suddenly going to start using 100 gallons of drinking water a day just to irrigate our lawns. Nobody decided that. It was cultural drift. And as we are getting more and more aware of these issues, we can have a sharper cultural movement in a different direction as we see our self-interest in that. I've noticed that with the awareness of the importance of native plants, as people are becoming more aware that our pollinators are dying and we depend on those pollinators for our food supply. So actually very sharp social change can happen pretty quickly, almost along the lines of a mobilization when people become aware all at once. There are things that seem to happen simultaneously without planning as more individuals get on board.
Yeah.
So
But you can see the weather, the extreme weather, for instance, because November we just officially came out of hurricane season, but during the hurricane season this year, I mean, the Bahamas were devastated by this Cat 5 that just ripped through the islands and caused a lot of damage. So we see this weather really increasing.
We do
on a regular basis.
And there are some just utter tragic stories like that. And I read a while back in the newspaper a story of somebody who his island home was literally being inundated by seawater, and all the residents were just going to have to permanently be moved away. And he said, well, I heard that a lot of this is from electricity use, that people are using electricity and it's causing global warming, but I've never even had a light bulb. I mean, there's a lot of disproportionate effects of needless, just too much consumption. Things we don't even really need are having an effect far away. I mean, if things were having an effect in our backyard more, we would see the feedback loop and respond to it. But a lot of our actions are having effects very, very far away where we don't see them. People don't mean bad. I mean, when people hear about a disaster someplace, they come forward with donations. We saw that after the Bahamas, how much of our community outpoured their support. So people can be very generous, but we just don't see always the effects of our actions right away. And this rising sea level and the superstorms and all that is kind of it's a silver lining in a way, because we're starting to see in our faces. It's very large feedback loops, but we're starting to see it.
You're absolutely right. And I think that's the greatest lesson to be learned, is something that you can see. We could talk all day about weather and environment and
Yeah.
change, but until you've witnessed it or seen it, it doesn't become real for a lot of people until
That's
then.
right. That's right. Until you've seen, oh, there's less fish in the river, or they're dying,
Yeah.
or I used to
Absolutely.
tell people. Somebody would say, "Well, I want to put my compost really far in the backyard because I don't want it to smell." So if you don't want your compost to smell, put it next to your kitchen window or your back door, so you keep an eye on it and you manage it so that it doesn't smell.
Right.
And I remember back in Austin, people were protesting a coal plant. Oh, don't put this near us. I said, put it near us so that we will
Keep
step
an eye
up
on
our
it. Yeah,
game
yeah.
and make it a not so damaging.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if it's out of sight, it becomes out of mind.
Out of
you
mind,
know?
or and it's more likely it might be out of our sight, but it's in some less privileged people's backyard. Yeah.
And you touched on the word electricity. So at some point, Jenny, what I'd like to see us do if you think about it, I'd like you to do something on wind power.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's an interesting topic down the road we
It's
can
a
do.
great topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what action steps then do you suggest for individuals to boost their personal and their household resilience?
Well, this is a really, really big topic. How do you boost your resilience? The first thing is to just even be thinking about it and planning. You can start having a long range plan. I mean, I have adopted Daytona Beach as my hometown, and I really don't plan to leave here. I really plan to grow old here and really invest in the community.
Great.
But also, having grown up in a military household, I have this like planning mentality. So I'm like, okay, what if my house goes underwater? Then what am I going to do?
And you're on the beach.
And
so-
I'm right on the beach, so I'm right on the forefront of things.
Right.
And of course, the people's natural response is, well, I'll move here or I'll move there. Well, if we really have a lot of displacement, that may not be so much of an option. So, well, then how would I adapt in place? But also in the more immediate term, we can also look at how some of our, for example, landscaping practices are exacerbating the flooding tendencies. We can actually make our soil have more of a carrying capacity for water, so the flooding isn't as severe. We can plant natural shorelines, and there's oyster reefs and mangroves and other natural shoreline elements along shorelines to mitigate floods, absorb stormwater. And so there are things we can do on the household level if you have a yard, or if you have an apartment or co-op, you can be talking to your co-op board or talk to your landlord about maybe having a more resilient landscape. Also really big is the social landscape. How resilient are we socially? Do you know your neighbors? Do you talk to each other? Do you share information? Things like food and water. We do not need to be so vulnerable about water. We don't need to be thinking we have to go to the store and buy water in bottles. In fact, some of that bottled water is contributing to a lot of environmental degradation, and companies are paying a pittance to pump out our springs and put water in plastic bottles, and then the plastic is feeding a lot of so it's a bad cycle.
It's a cycle.
But if we learn to collect rainwater on the household level, or on the level of, for example, a lot of church buildings are pretty big. Your environmental ministry or your gardening ministry can get involved in collecting and harvesting and using rainwater. And something about getting into that process creates a mentality where you start to feel more in charge of your fate, and you start to also be able to look out for other people and share and help each other. Yeah. Things like food. Okay. Not everybody is good at growing food. I actually have a black thumb. Being an eco-educator, I'm persistent at gardening, but I really am not great at growing food.
Right.
However, I can choose to support local farms when I can, and support the growth of local agriculture. Agriculture is really actually very big in Volusia County. I think it employs something like 50,000 people in Volusia County. But there's some room for local small organic farms to grow. There was a Volusia farm tour a couple weeks back, and I went and saw the Common Grounds farm and some other farms. And a lot of those offer subscriptions. You could subscribe to a local farm. You can be investing in your local people, your local business. And speaking of local business, a lot of people, they want to shop local, but then they say, it's a little more expensive, or, oh, that place doesn't have a very big parking lot. I don't know. I think I want to go to this other place. Well, when you're shopping local, or when you're eating at a local restaurant, locally owned, mom and pop, you're doing more than just getting your consumer needs met. You're supporting resilience in your community.
Yes.
'Cause those are social connections.
Absolutely.
You know.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And you know, I give you a lot of credit living on the beach side, because there has to be a fear factor there when we see this extreme weather that we see all the time.
But I've lived
you
in
know,
Tokyo. I've lived
Uh-huh.
in Tokyo, Japan, where earthquakes are always a threat.
Yes.
Lived in California, where earthquakes are always a threat. I have lived in New Mexico, where droughts are a threat, and then other places out west, wildfires. There is no place. I always say you could run, but you can't hide.
Yeah.
This past year, something like 19 million acres of the Midwest was rendered unplantable by flooding. We can't just say, "Oh, I'm just going to go to this other place."
Yeah.
After a while, I mean, for my lifetime, I aspired to live right within walking distance of the beach. So there I am. My choice would be adapt in place and help others do so, as long as it's an option.
Yeah. And you know, it's not just the beach. I mean, our Nova Canal here in Daytona Beach has been, you know, an issue for quite some time.
It has been.
Time.
It has
You
been.
know, the Army Corps of Engineers have been here more than once
Yeah.
to assess it, and so I know that's something that we've got on our plate to do as the city, with partnerships, you know,
partnerships.
from the state and from the federal government as
And
well.
and even local academia too.
Yes.
I was going to mention there's a professor at BCU, Dr. Jay Cho, and she's doing some great work with stormwater remediation.
Oh, I know Dr. J.
Do you know-
I-
yeah.
I've met her.
Well,
I should
good.
say.
She
I
has a
don't know her, but I've
YouTube
met her.
channel about her Halifax River Urban Watershed Initiative.
Okay.
And she's all about incorporating the economic and the social piece with the environmental. And some of her work is really helping to boost our local resilience.
Yeah.
Also, the Riverside Conservancy down in the Edgewater area, Kelly McGee, getting a lot of grants to plant living shorelines, and even getting homeowners in on it. You know, getting conservation easements from homeowners and
Yeah.
getting their buy-in. Same, Dr. Cho's doing that as well. She and her students. So there's local stuff going on. And regarding the Nova Canal, you know, engineers are trained to look at things a certain way and implement a certain type of solution. But there's additional opportunities further uphill, so to speak. I mean, we don't exactly have a hilly place, right? But so to speak, if say that the basin around Nova Canal is the bottom of the hill, a lot of us live uphill of that somehow. Every place we catch water, at every elevation, in our yards, whatever, we are catching and storing more water that is not flowing all the way down to the bottom of the hill.
You're absolutely
Yeah,
right.
we're all catchment points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, I used to live in Woodcliff Estates, which is right off of Nova Road, and Nova Canal ran right across the front of our entrance into that complex. And someone described to me that Midtown is literally like a bowl.
A bowl.
It is a bowl, and so all the water just flows down into the bowl of Midtown,
That's right.
which causes a lot of the things that we see. But you know, we're working on you know, remedying that situation, and it's gotten better. But I can remember one storm we had, no name storm, that came through, and literally I had to park my car on Nova Road, walk into Woodcliff Estates, and the water was up past my knee to the mid-thigh.
Yep.
And I was walking to get to my house. It was
Yeah.
just incredible. So there are things that we see that we have to address. We are addressing them to make things better. And it you know, it takes time. It takes
some
persistence,
time, yeah.
and we have to be resilient.
Resilient.
Yeah.
And the thing about resilience to think of is it's decentralized. It's each and every one of us and how we interact with others. And for example, with things like the flooding, well, a lot of trees and other vegetation have been removed, making way for just flat grass. And that is not an absorptive medium. That is not a sponge. I just came from giving a talk for the Ormond Master Gardeners, where, you know, it's all about turn the soil or turn the land or turn your life from a drain to a sponge. And so we're probably not going to be able to unpave a lot of the new stuff that's been paved, but we can go back in on even the tiniest little piece of land, and we can be planting taller grasses, tall coastal grasses that have much water absorption potential as well as nutrient absorption. So we'll be doing
Absolutely.
ourselves a favor.
Yeah.
And in addition, anything green that we plant, photosynthesis, by which the plant gets its food from the sun, actually cools off the air around it.
Wow.
I didn't know that until I was doing the research from another top. It's an endothermic reaction. There's a reason why standing under a tree is cool, and it's not just because, yeah, it's shade, it's blocking the sun, but that green reaction's going on that actually cools off the air.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Daytona Beach Radio today. My special guest has been our local environmental expert, Miss Jenny Nazak. She always comes to the program each month, the second Wednesday of the month. Put it on your calendar. I always learn a lot. I know you do too, especially if you sit with us for the hour. Very interesting stuff. And these are the kinds of things, friends, that you can share with your children. You can maybe spark some interest in your child for a project that they may want to look at after school to bring to class for extra credit, because the environment is so important, and being a green Daytona is what Ms. Nazak has really been helping us to see is doable, and not only doable, but educating us as to how we do it. So I always appreciate her coming on the air. She's always a wealth of information, and just a delightful spirit to have here with us in the studio.
Well, thank you.
each
And I
week.
was going to say, I always appreciate you guys because you've made me really up my game. Like, how much more can we know?
Right.
And here to also give a plug for the Breakers Oceanfront Park Environmental Learning Center.
That's a mouthful.
Daytona Beach by the Crab Shack Pier,
Yeah.
the little known treasure that has a monthly lecture series.
Yes.
And
yes.
and it's about to expand. We're going to be having more environmental talks and presentations there
That's
in
what we
2020.
need. That's
yeah.
what we need.
Yeah.
And we've been mandated by our county to do that at that location. So
Twist my arm.
so it's something we have to do, and I'm glad that we do, because I think the knowledge is power.
Yeah.
You know, and I say that on this program quite often. And when you don't know something, it really can affect you in so many negative ways.
Absolutely.
But when you do, then the positive begins to reinforce how you turn the corner and make change.
Right, right. And I want to talk about knowledge a little bit. I specifically want to talk about knowledge of our elders. A lot of our elders are still very, very close to earth-based knowledge. Know how to can and make fermented foods
Yes.
and do natural stuff. All those skills build resiliency. So whatever your what your area of interest in, if you're into sewing and knitting, like boost your skills in that area, you'll be boosting your whole community's resiliency. Boost your food preservation knowledge, you'll
Yes.
be boosting your resiliency and your communities. Landscaping and so on.
Yeah.
I want to point out really the importance of that whole social resilient piece. The communities that tend to bounce back well after disasters were socially more resilient before the disaster already. So the more,
Makes sense.
as dumb as it sounds, like even just if you say hi to a person in your neighborhood and you know each other's faces, I won't say dumb, it sounds really small, but it adds up,
It does.
you know?
Because then you kind of you may feel some attachment to that person by having gotten to know them just by saying hello every day.
Right.
And then in the aftermath of a storm, for instance, you don't see them or they're missing. I think that concern begins to well up in us, and we that's how we connect, I think, as a community.
Absolutely.
Without
And
a
we
doubt.
we share skills and knowledge inevitably.
Yeah. Well, I
5
think
minutes.
we're coming.
Wow.
Yeah, we're coming. It went quickly. Coming to
Time
the
flies. I think I
to
mentioned
the end
about
of the
one
broadcast.
1/10. There's
I
always
know,
more.
I
There's
know.
always, but wait, there's more.
I can see your notes from here, and it's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot.
There's always a lot.
But
yeah.
I do want to thank you, as always, Jenny, for being on the program today.
Thank you, Ron and
And-
Carla. It's always
yep.
a pleasure.
Well, yep, we
To
look
be,
forward
to be continued always.
Yes, to January. I don't know what you're going to bring, but I know it'll be
I don't
interesting.
either, but I'll find
Okay.
something.
I know it'll be good, whatever it is.
Thank you.
Just a couple announcements, everybody, before we get off the air today. The A Warm Winter, an exhibit of handmade quilts, started on December the 6th at the Yvonne Scarlett Golden Center. There are quilts made by local individuals, handmade, and they are on exhibit right now at the Yvonne Scarlett Golden Center, which is at 1000 Vine Street here in Daytona Beach. You can go down from 11 a.m. until 8 p.m. in the evening, Monday through Friday, and 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturday. Free, open to the public. You can look at all the great quilts. And I'm going to have somebody on the program to talk about this next week. So be tuned in next Wednesday. We're going to have two individuals on here to talk about what's going on at Yvonne Scarlett Golden. And then on December 14th, which is Saturday, the Holly Jolly Christmas Parade is coming to the city of Daytona Beach. This will be at 6 p.m. in the evening on Saturday, and it will be right on Beach Street. Beginning at Bethune Point Park is where the parade will start. It will then travel north on Beach Street, heading towards the new Brown & Brown building. And you don't want to miss it. 6 p.m. Saturday, this Saturday, the Holly Jolly Christmas Parade. Make sure you get there before 6. Get your car parked. They're going to be closing the streets at about 5 o'clock. So get there in time to bring your lawn chair or however you would like to, a blanket if you want to just sit on the grass itself, and enjoy what I know is going to be a tremendous parade. We had a meeting on site this week, a couple of days ago, and we planned for your enjoyment. So get the family together. Holly Jolly Christmas Parade, Saturday, December 14th, 6 p.m. in the evening. I don't have time to go through all the jobs today. We're running out of time, but I will give you the website. Go to our city website at www.codb.us. That's www.codb.us. Hover over departments with your mouse. You'll see a drop down and look for human resources. In the drop down, click human resources. The page you're brought to, then on the left, you'll see job opportunities. Click job opportunities, and all of the jobs that the city has available will be there for you to review. If you're qualified or you know someone who's qualified, please call them, tell them to apply. We are an equal opportunity employer, and we would love to have you as a member of the team that works for the city of Daytona Beach. Thank you again, Ms. Nazak.
So much.
We'll see you next time.
Yeah,
Thank
see
you,
you next
Carla.
time.
And to all of you who are listening, we want you to be safe. We want you to be well. And thank you for listening. And we'll be right back here, Lord willing, in 1 week. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. And we hope you've enjoyed today's program here on Daytona Beach Radio, broadcast from the world's most famous beach. To learn more about the city of Daytona Beach, take a minute and visit our website at www.codb.us and browse through the online information about our city. Again, the website is www.codb.us. Tune in next Thursday, 12 noon.